Captain Sarah Chen pressed her face against the observation deck window of the mining station Prometheus. The asteroid field stretched endlessly before her, a graveyard of rock and ice floating in the void between star systems. 3 months ago, her team had detected unusual energy, readings from asteroid X-47. What they found there changed everything she thought she knew about the universe. The creature in the containment bay below was no larger than a house cat, but its scales shimmered with colors that seemed to shift between dimensions. When it breathed, tiny sparks of what could only be described as pure energy escaped its nostrils. The xenobiology team had classified it as an unknown species, possibly the last of its kind. Sarah had named it Ember. Dr. Marcus Webb approached from behind, his footsteps echoing in the empty observation area. "The council's decision came through," he said quietly. "They want Ember transferred to the research facility on Europa immediately." Sarah's jaw tightened. She had spent weeks studying the creature, learning its behaviors, understanding its needs. Ember wasn't just another specimen to be catalogued and dissected. The little dragon showed intelligence that rivaled human children, responding to her voice and even attempting to communicate through a series of melodic chirps and trills. "They don't understand what they're dealing with," Sarah replied, watching as Ember curled up in the artificial nest she had constructed. "This isn't just some exotic animal. Yesterday it solved the puzzle box I gave it in under 10 minutes. It's learning our language," Webb nodded grimly. "I know, but the Council sees potential weapons technology. Those energy discharges from its breath could revolutionize our defense systems. The war with the Zephyrians isn't going well." Sarah turned away from the window. The Zephyrian conflict had been raging for 5 years, ever since humanity's expansion into the outer systems had brought them into contact with the hostile alien empire. Every discovery, every new technology was immediately evaluated for its military potential. "When do they want the transfer?" she asked. "Tomorrow. A military escort arrives at 800 hours. That evening, Sarah made her way to the containment bay. The facility was mostly empty, with only a skeleton crew maintaining night operations. She had convinced security that she needed to conduct one final behavioral assessment before the transfer. Ember looked up as she entered, its large, opalescent eyes reflecting the soft lighting of the bay. The creature made a soft trilling sound that Sarah had come to recognize as a greeting. She sat cross-legged on the floor outside the containment field. "Hey there, little one," she whispered. "I'm sorry about what's going to happen tomorrow." To her amazement, Ember approached the barrier and placed its tiny, clawed hand against the energy field. Where it touched, the barrier flickered with rainbow patterns. The dragon tilted its head, studying Sarah's face with an intensity that was almost human. Sarah activated her personal tablet and pulled up the linguistic analysis software she had been working on. For weeks she had been recording Ember's vocalizations, trying to identify patterns. What she had discovered was both fascinating and terrifying. Ember wasn't just intelligent. It was trying to warn them about something. The recordings showed clear patterns of distress whenever the creature was exposed to certain frequencies of electromagnetic radiation, the same frequencies used by Zephyrian communication arrays. Through careful observation and testing, Sarah had begun to piece together fragments of what Ember was trying to communicate. Danger. Coming. Protect. Family. The implications made Sarah's blood run cold. If Ember's species had encountered the Zephyrians before, if they knew something about the alien empire's true capabilities, then the little dragon wasn't just a potential weapon. It was a refugee, possibly the sole survivor of an entire civilization. Sarah made a decision that would change the course of human history. She disabled the containment field. Ember stepped forward cautiously, then ran to Sarah and climbed onto her lap. The creature was warm, almost feverishly so, and Sarah could feel a faint vibration through its body like a purring cat. But this was different. The vibration seemed to resonate with something deep inside her mind. Suddenly, images flooded her consciousness, not her own memories, but Ember's. She saw vast cities of crystal and light, populated by dragons of every size and color imaginable. She witnessed the arrival of dark ships from the void, vessels that seemed to devour light itself. The Zephyrians had come not as conquerors, but as destroyers. The dragons had fought valiantly, their energy breath capable of disrupting Zephyrian technology in ways that conventional human weapons could not. But they were outnumbered, and one by one their worlds fell to the alien menace. In desperation, the surviving dragons had scattered their young across the galaxy, hiding them in remote locations in the hope that some would survive. Ember's parents had died protecting their child's escape pod, which had crash-landed on asteroid X-47 millions of years ago. The little dragon had remained in stasis until Sarah's mining team had accidentally activated the pod's emergency systems. As the vision faded, Sarah understood the magnitude of what she had learned. Ember wasn't just a key to defeating the Zephyrians. The little dragon was proof that they could be defeated, that somewhere in its genetic memory lay the knowledge humanity needed to turn the tide of war. But first, she had to protect Ember from becoming just another tool of human ambition. Sarah stood up, cradling the dragon in her arms. "We're getting out of here, little one," she whispered. "And then we're going to save both our species." The escape pod bay was 3 decks down, and Sarah knew the security rotations by heart. She had perhaps 6 hours before the military escort arrived. 6 hours to disappear into the vast expanse of space with the most important discovery in human history. As they made their way through the dimly lit corridors of the mining station, Ember remained perfectly still in her arms, as if understanding the gravity of their situation. Sarah's heart pounded with each step, knowing that what she was about to do would brand her as a traitor to her own species. But sometimes, she thought being a traitor to humanity was the most human thing you could do. The escape pod's engines hummed quietly as Sarah guided it away from the mining station. She had programmed a course for the abandoned research outpost on Kepler 442c, a planet that had been evacuated when the Zephyrian advance threatened the outer colonies. It would buy them time, though Sarah knew their disappearance would be discovered within hours. Ember sat in the co-pilot seat, secured by a makeshift harness Sarah had fashioned from emergency straps. The little dragon's eyes were wide with wonder as it watched the stars stream past the viewport. Every few minutes it would make soft chirping sounds and point at something in space, as if recognizing landmarks from genetic memories spanning millions of years. Sarah's communication console crackled to life. "Escape Pod 7, this is Prometheus Control. You are not cleared for departure. Return to the station immediately." She switched off the transmitter. There was no going back now. The journey to Kepler 442c would take 18 hours, giving Sarah time to study the data she had managed to download before their escape. Her tablet contained every scan, every biological reading, and every linguistic analysis she had performed on Ember. More importantly, it held the key to understanding the visions the dragon had shared with her. As they traveled through hyperspace, Sarah began to piece together the full scope of what humanity was facing. The Zephyrians weren't just another alien empire seeking territory. They were something far worse, a cosmic plague that consumed entire civilizations, leaving nothing but dead worlds in their wake. The dragons had called them the Void Seekers in their ancient tongue. They traveled between galaxies, devouring the life force of entire star systems. The energy didn't just power their ships. It was their food, their very essence. Every living being they killed made them stronger. But the dragons had discovered something crucial during their final war. The Void Seekers had a weakness, a specific frequency of bioelectric energy that disrupted their technology and caused their living ships to sicken and die. The dragon's breath wasn't just fire or plasma. It was concentrated life force, the opposite of everything the Zephyrians represented. Ember stirred in its seat, looking up at Sarah with those ancient, knowing eyes. The dragon made a series of complex sounds, and Sarah activated her translation program. The meaning that came through made her gasp. Teach. You. Fight. Together. Save. Many. Sarah stared at the display. Ember wasn't just offering to help humanity fight the Zephyrians. The little dragon was offering to teach humans how to use their own life force as a weapon. "Is that even possible?" Sarah whispered. Ember nodded solemnly, then did something that changed everything. The dragon placed its tiny clawed hand on Sarah's arm, and suddenly she could feel it. The energy flowing through her body, the bioelectric field that surrounded every living thing. It was faint in humans compared to dragons, but it was there. With concentration, Sarah found she could make it stronger. A soft glow emanated from her skin where Ember touched her. The little dragon made an encouraging chirp, and the glow intensified. Sarah felt a surge of vitality unlike anything she had ever experienced. Her mind became clearer, her reflexes sharper, Her awareness of the space around them expanded dramatically. "This is how your people fought them," she breathed, not with technology but with the very essence of life itself. The moment was interrupted by an alarm from the navigation console. Sarah's blood ran cold as she read the display. 3 ships had dropped out of hyperspace behind them, military vessels from the human fleet. Commander Torres's voice filled the pod. "Dr. Chen, by order of the Colonial Defense Council, you will return specimen X-47 immediately. You have 10 minutes to comply before we are authorized to use force." Sarah looked at Ember, who had gone completely still, its scales shifting to darker hues that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. The dragon's expression was one of betrayal and fear, emotions so human that Sarah's heart broke. "I'm not giving up," she told Ember firmly. "We're going to find another way." She activated the pod's emergency systems, rerouting power from life support to the engines. The little craft shuddered as it accelerated beyond safe limits, but they needed every advantage they could get. Behind them, the military ships matched their speed easily. Sarah's escape pod was never meant for this kind of pursuit. She had perhaps 5 minutes before they would be in weapons range. That's when Ember did something extraordinary. The little dragon closed its eyes and began to hum, a low harmonic sound that seemed to resonate through the hull of the pod. Sarah felt the vibration in her bones, and suddenly the escape pod's energy reading spiked dramatically. "What are you doing?" she asked. The answer came not in words but in understanding. Ember was sharing its life force with the ship's systems, supercharging them in ways human technology had never achieved. The engines roared with new power and their speed increased by orders of magnitude, but Sarah could see the cost. Ember was growing weaker with each passing moment, its vibrant scales dulling as it poured its energy into keeping them alive. "Stop," she said urgently. "You're killing yourself." Ember looked at her with eyes that held the wisdom of ages. Family, protect family. The word hit Sarah like a physical blow. Somehow, in the space of a few days, she had become family to this ancient, lonely creature. The last of its kind had chosen to trust her, to share its secrets with her, and now it was willing to die to protect her. "No," Sarah said firmly. "We do this together, or not at all." She placed her hand on Ember's head and focused on the energy she had felt earlier. Slowly, carefully, she began to share her own life force with the dragon. It was like learning to breathe underwater, unnatural and terrifying, but somehow right. The effect was immediate. Ember's scales brightened and the little dragon looked at Sarah with something approaching awe. Together, their combined energy flowed into the ship's systems, creating a harmonic resonance that pushed them beyond the reach of their pursuers. Commander Torres's voice crackled over the comm one final time, filled with confusion and frustration. "What the hell kind of engine signature is that? It's like nothing I've ever seen." Sarah smiled grimly as they approached the hyperspace jump point for Kepler 442c. "It's the sound of evolution, Commander. The sound of humanity learning to become something more." As they jumped to light speed, Sarah caught a glimpse of something in the distance that made her blood freeze. Dark shapes moving between the stars, ships that seemed to bend light around them. The Zephyrian advance fleet was closer than anyone had realized. She looked down at Ember, who had seen them too. The little dragon's expression was grim but determined. The race to save both their species had begun, and they were humanity's only hope of survival. But first, they had to survive long enough to share what they had learned. The abandoned outpost on Kepler 442c loomed ahead, a sanctuary where they could plan their next move. Sarah just hoped they would live long enough to make a difference. The research outpost on Kepler 442c had been abandoned for 6 months, but its automated systems still functioned. Sarah guided their escape pod into the docking bay, grateful for the shelter the facility provided. The planet's purple sky was streaked with strange auroras, a side effect of the electromagnetic storms that made long-range communication nearly impossible, perfect for staying hidden. Ember had grown quiet during the landing, its usual chirps replaced by a focused intensity that reminded Sarah of a student preparing for a difficult exam. As they explored the empty corridors of the outpost, the little dragon would pause at certain locations, as if sensing something Sarah couldn't detect. "What is it?" she asked during one of these stops. Ember placed its clawed hand against a wall panel, and the surface began to glow with the same rainbow pattern Sarah had seen at the mining station. Ancient symbols appeared, flowing across the metal like living text. "Dragon writing," Sarah whispered. activating her tablet to record everything. Through their mental connection, Ember shared the meaning. The symbols were a warning system, left by dragon refugees who had passed through this area eons ago. They spoke of safe havens and dangerous territories, of places where the void seekers could not follow. But there was something else, something that made Ember tremble with excitement. Hidden within the complex script was a map, the location of other dragon survivors. Sarah's hands shook as she processed the implications. "You're not alone," she said softly. "Your people are still out there." Ember's response was a mixture of hope and desperate urgency. The locations marked on the map were scattered across the galaxy, each one hidden in places so remote that even human exploration had never reached them. But the dragons there were sleeping, waiting for a signal that it was safe to awaken. The signal could only come from one place: the Heartstone, the central consciousness that connected all dragons across space and time. And according to the map, the Heartstone was located in a system that was now directly in the path of the Zephyrian advance. Sarah spent the next 3 days studying everything Ember could teach her about dragon physiology and the bioelectric combat techniques that had once held back the Void Seekers. The training was exhausting and often painful, as her human nervous system struggled to channel energies it had never been designed to handle. But gradually, she began to understand. The key wasn't brute force but harmony. Dragons didn't generate energy. They focused and amplified the life force that already existed in all living things. Every plant, every microorganism, every breath of wind on a living planet contributed to a vast network of bioelectric potential. Humans had the same capability, but it lay dormant, suppressed by millennia of technological dependence. With Ember's guidance, Sarah learned to awaken that potential within herself. On the 4th day, she successfully generated her first energy discharge. It was tiny compared to what Ember could produce, barely enough to power a handheld device, but it proved the concept worked. "Now we need to scale this up," Sarah muttered, studying the tactical data she had stolen from the mining station. "The Zephyrian fleet will reach the core worlds in less than 3 weeks. We need an army of trained humans, and we need them fast." Ember made a series of complex sounds, and Sarah's translation program worked overtime to interpret them. What came through made her heart skip a beat. Not army. Network. Many minds. One purpose. Dragon Way. Sarah understood immediately. The dragons hadn't fought the Zephyrians as individuals, but as a collective consciousness, each mind connected to every other through the bioelectric field that surrounded living worlds. If humans could be taught to link their minds in the same way, their combined life force could be focused into weapons that would make conventional military technology obsolete. But first, they needed to reach the other humans, and that meant leaving their sanctuary. Sarah spent hours crafting a message that could be transmitted on multiple frequencies, using codes known only to the scientific community. In it, she outlined everything she had learned about the Zephyrian threat and humanity's potential to fight back. She included Ember's linguistic data and basic training protocols for accessing bioelectric energy. The message went out across the galaxy, transmitted to research stations, universities, and anyone with the scientific knowledge to understand its implications. The response was swift and overwhelming. Within hours, Sarah was receiving replies from scientists on dozens of worlds, all reporting similar phenomena. Humans everywhere were beginning to awaken to their latent abilities, but not everyone was pleased with these developments. Commander Taurus's voice crackled over the emergency frequency, cutting through the electromagnetic interference. "Dr. Chen, you have compromised humanity's most valuable asset and violated direct orders from the Colonial Defense Council. A full battle fleet is en route to your location." Sarah looked at Ember, who had grown visibly agitated. The little dragon was sensing something beyond human perception, the approach of the very ships they had been trying to avoid. "How long do we have?" Sarah asked. Ember's response chilled her to the bone. The fleet wasn't just hunting them. It was being followed by something else. Something that moved through space like a shadow swallowing stars. The Zephyrian vanguard had arrived ahead of schedule. Sarah made a decision that would either save humanity or doom it forever. She activated the outpost's long-range transmitters and broadcast on every frequency simultaneously, abandoning any pretense of hiding their location. "This is Dr. Sarah Chen to all human colonies. The Zephyrians are here. Conventional weapons will not stop them. Your only hope is to listen to what I'm about to teach you. As alarms began blaring throughout the facility, Sarah started transmitting everything she and Ember had discovered about bioelectric combat. The training protocols, the meditation techniques, the methods for linking human consciousness into a collective network. All of it went out across the galaxy in a desperate race against time. Ember stood beside her, its small form glowing with gathered energy as it prepared for the confrontation to come. Through their mental link, Sarah felt the dragon's determination and its absolute faith in her ability to lead humanity to victory. But she also felt its sadness. The little dragon knew that what they were about to attempt would likely cost them both their lives. Together, Sarah whispered, placing her hand on Ember's head as the first ships appeared in the planet's atmosphere. The final battle for both their species was about to begin, and Sarah could only hope that her message had reached enough people to make a difference. In the distance, she could see the dark shapes of Zephyrian vessels dropping out of hyperspace, their light-devouring hulls making the stars themselves appear to dim. Humanity's greatest test had arrived, and they would meet it not with missiles or plasma cannons, but with the very force that made them alive. The age of bioelectric warfare was about to dawn, and Sarah Chen stood at its center, a human woman and a baby dragon preparing to show the galaxy what life could accomplish when it refused to yield to the void. The first Zephyrian scout ship descended through Kepler 442c's atmosphere like a living shadow, its biomechanical hull pulsing with veins of dark energy. Sarah watched from the outpost's observation deck as the alien vessel touched down in the valley below, its very presence seeming to drain the color from the surrounding landscape. Ember pressed against her leg, small body trembling with recognition and ancient fear. Through their mental connection, Sarah felt the dragon's memories of similar ships arriving at peaceful worlds, followed by systematic extermination and the harvesting of all life force. "Not this time," Sarah whispered, her hand glowing faintly as she channeled the bioelectric energy Ember had taught her to access. The human fleet commanded by Torres had arrived in orbit, but their ships hung motionless in space, their crews paralyzed by what they were witnessing. The Zephyrian vessel was unlike anything. In their databases, a fusion of technology and living tissue that defied every principle of known physics. Sarah's communication console crackled with panicked voices from the fleet. "What the hell is that thing? Our sensors can't get a lock on it. The readings are impossible." She activated her transmitter, speaking directly to Torres. "Commander, your conventional weapons won't work against them. Order your ships to maintain distance and prepare to receive new tactical data. Chen, you're under arrest for treason. I won't take orders from a fugitive." Before Sarah could respond, the Zephyrian ship began to change. Its hull split open like a flower, revealing a core of swirling darkness that seemed to bend space itself. Tendrils of energy reached out from the ship, touching the ground and immediately draining it of life. Plants withered, soil turned to ash, and the very air grew cold and still. The effect spread outward in a perfect circle, consuming everything in its path. Ember let out a sharp cry and leaped onto the console, its claws dancing across the controls with surprising dexterity. The dragon had activated the outpost's emergency beacon, sending a signal that would be received by every research station in the sector. "What are you doing?" Sarah asked. Through their link, Ember's intentions became clear. The dragon wasn't just calling for help, it was issuing a challenge. In the ancient language of its people, Ember was announcing its presence to the Zephyrian ship, declaring itself a guardian of this world. The response was immediate and terrifying. A piercing shriek echoed across the planet's surface as the Zephyrian ship detected the dragon's biosignature. The alien vessel rose into the air, its hull reconfiguring into something resembling a massive predator. Weapon ports opened like hungry mouths, and streams of dark energy began raining down on the outpost. Sarah grabbed Ember and dove for cover as the building shook around them. The Zephyrian weapons didn't just damage, they consumed, turning solid matter into energy that was absorbed by the attacking ship. "We can't fight that thing alone," Sarah gasped, but Ember was already moving. The little dragon ran to the outpost's power core and placed both hands against the main conduit. Immediately, the facility's lights began to pulse in rhythm with Ember's breathing. The dragon was channeling its life force into the station's systems, transforming them into something the original designers had never imagined. The outpost's defensive shields flickered to life, But instead of the standard electromagnetic barriers, they glowed with the same rainbow patterns Sarah had seen wherever Ember touched technology. The Zephyrian energy beams struck the shields and were not just deflected. They were converted into pure life force that fed back into the station's power grid. For the first time in the conflict, a Zephyrian attack had been not just stopped, but turned against itself. The alien ship pulled back, its attack patterns shifting as it tried to understand what it was facing. In orbit, Commander Torres's voice filled the communication channels, his earlier hostility replaced by awe and desperation. "Chen, whatever you just did, we need that technology now." 3 more Zephyrian ships just dropped out of hyperspace. "They're heading for the colony worlds." Sarah looked at Ember, who nodded solemnly. It was time to stop running and start fighting back. "Commander, I'm transmitting bioelectric enhancement protocols to your entire fleet. Have your crews follow the instructions exactly, and evacuate all non-essential personnel to the planet's surface." "What are you planning?" "We're going to turn your ships into weapons the Zephyrians have never faced before." Working together, Sarah and Ember began broadcasting the techniques they had developed, using the outpost's enhanced communication array to reach every human ship in the system. The protocols were complex, requiring each crew member to link their consciousness with their ship's computer systems and channel their life force into the vessel's power grid. It was dangerous. The process could kill anyone who attempted it without proper preparation. But across the fleet, brave men and women began following Sarah's instructions, guided by Ember's ancient knowledge of bioelectric combat. The first ship to successfully complete the transformation was Torres's flagship, the UES Defiance. As its crew linked their minds with the ship's systems, the vessel began to glow with the same life energy patterns that protected the outpost. Its weapons converted from conventional plasma cannons to focused beams of pure bioelectric force. The effect spread from ship to ship as crews mastered the techniques. Within an hour, the entire human fleet had been transformed into something unprecedented in galactic warfare, vessels powered by the combined will and life force of their crews. But the Zephyrians were adapting too. The alien ships in orbit began clustering together, their hulls merging into a single massive entity that dwarfed the largest human battleship. Dark energy coursed between them as they combined their consumption capabilities, creating a weapon designed to drain entire planets of life. Sarah felt Ember's fear through their connection. The little dragon had witnessed this process before on worlds that no longer existed. "Can we stop it?" she asked. Ember's response was complex, filled with ancient pain and desperate hope. The dragons had faced combined Zephyrian entities before, and had found only one way to defeat them: by merging their own consciousness into a collective mind that could match the aliens' combined strength. But such a merger required a focal point, a mind strong enough to coordinate the thoughts and energies of every participant. For the dragons, that focal point had been their eldest, most experienced warriors. Humanity had no such warriors. They had only Sarah, a xenobiologist who had learned these techniques days ago, and Ember, a baby dragon carrying the genetic memories of a dead civilization. It would have to be enough. Sarah activated the fleet-wide communication system and spoke directly to every human in the system. "This is Dr. Chen. What I'm about to ask of you will be the hardest thing any of us has ever attempted. We need to link our minds together, all of us, and fight as one organism." The silence that followed was deafening. Then one by one voices began responding across the communication channels. "I'm in." That was Torres, his voice steady despite the fear Sarah could hear beneath it. "Standing by for neural link. Dr. Martinez, from the research vessel Perseus, whatever it takes to stop these things." Captain Wong from the merchant ship. Golden dawn across the fleet, across the planet's surface. Humanity began joining their minds together in a network that spanned space itself. Sarah felt the moment when the first connections formed, a gentle touching of thoughts that gradually expanded into something magnificent and terrifying. She was no longer just Sarah Chen. She was part of something greater, a collective consciousness that included the hopes and fears and desperate courage of every human in the system. And at the center of it all, like a tiny flame in an ocean of darkness, was Ember's ancient wisdom guiding them all toward victory or oblivion. The final confrontation was about to begin. The merged Zephyrian entity hung in space like a wound in reality itself, its combined mass stretching for kilometers in every direction. Dark energy crackled between its various segments as thousands of alien minds coordinated their assault on the planet below. Sarah could feel its hunger through the bioelectric network, an endless void that consumed not just matter and energy, but the very concept of life itself. Through the collective human consciousness, she sensed the fear and determination of every person in the system. Commander Torres's military discipline, Dr. Martinez's scientific curiosity, the desperate courage of civilian crews who had never imagined they would face humanity's greatest threat. Their thoughts flowed together like streams joining a river, creating something that was more than the sum of its parts, and at the center of it all was Ember, the little dragon serving as a bridge between human and ancient dragon knowledge, its genetic memories providing the tactical understanding that humanity lacked. Focus on the primary convergence point, Sarah transmitted through the network, her words carrying Ember's ancient wisdom. The Zephyrians draw power from a central core. If we can disrupt it, the entire entity will collapse. The human fleet moved as one, their bioelectric-enhanced ships arranging themselves in a formation that maximized their combined energy output. Each vessel pulsed with the life force of its crew, creating patterns of light that reminded Sarah of a vast neural network, firing in perfect synchronization. The Zephyrian entity responded by extending tentacles of pure darkness toward the approaching ships. Where the tendrils touched space itself, stars seemed to dim and background radiation grew cold. These weren't weapons in any conventional sense. They were extensions of the void, reaching out to drain the life from everything they encountered. The first contact came when the UES Defiance intersected one of the tendrils. The ship's bioelectric shields flared as they met the consuming darkness, and for a moment Sarah thought they would be overwhelmed. Then she felt Torres's determination flood through the network, followed by the combined will of his entire crew. The tendril recoiled. For the first time in galactic history, Zephyrian technology had been not just resisted, but actively repelled by the force of life itself. The alien entity's shriek of pain and confusion echoed across multiple dimensions, causing reality to ripple like water. "It's working," Dr. Martinez's voice carried through the collective consciousness. "Their absorption ability has limits. If we hit them with enough life force, we can overload their systems." But the effort was taking its toll on the human crews. Sarah could feel their strength draining as they poured their life energy into the ship's weapons. Several of the smaller vessels were already showing signs of stress. Their crews pushed beyond safe limits in the desperate battle. Ember pressed closer to Sarah, its small body trembling with effort as it channeled additional energy into the network. The dragon's contribution was far greater than its size suggested. Its genetic memories provided not just knowledge, but access to techniques that had taken the dragon's millennia to develop. Through Ember, Sarah learned the true secret of bioelectric combat. It wasn't about generating more energy than your opponent. It was about achieving perfect harmony between all living things in the surrounding space, creating a resonance that amplified natural life force beyond anything artificial technology could match. "Everyone needs to link deeper," Sarah transmitted across the network. "Stop thinking of yourselves as separate beings. We are one organism, one mind, one purpose." The transformation was gradual at first, then suddenly explosive. Individual thoughts began merging into shared consciousness as the barriers between separate minds dissolved. Sarah felt herself expanding, becoming part of something vast and wonderful and terrifyingly powerful. She was Torres, feeling the weight of command and the love for his crew that drove every decision. She was Dr. Martinez, experiencing the joy of discovery even in the face of death. She was the merchant captain who had left behind a family on Mars, the engineer who dreamed of building better worlds, the young pilot who had joined the fleet to see the stars, and she was Ember, carrying the accumulated wisdom of a species that had once filled the galaxy with light and hope. The collective human-dragon consciousness focused its attention on the Zephyrian entity, and what it saw made it pause in amazement. The alien construct wasn't just a weapon or a predator. It was a symptom of something far larger and more terrible, a cosmic cancer that had infected multiple galaxies, turning living worlds into feeding grounds for an intelligence that existed in the spaces between dimensions. But there was something the Void Seekers had never encountered before. In all their eons of consumption, they had never faced a species that could achieve true collective consciousness while maintaining individual identity. The dragons had come close, but their hierarchical society had created limitations. Humans, with their chaotic individualism and stubborn refusal to submit to authority, had accidentally created something new. A hive mind that preserved free will. A collective that grew stronger through diversity rather than conformity. The realization struck the Zephyrian entity like a physical blow. For the first time in its existence, it encountered something it could not understand or categorize. Its attempts to drain the human consciousness met with resistance that adapted and evolved with each attack. Now, Sarah Ember Humanity transmitted across the network. All ships, full convergence. Show them what life looks like when it refuses to surrender. The human fleet attacked as one, their bioelectric weapons creating beams of pure life force that cut through the darkness like swords of light. Each ship's crew poured everything they had into the assault. Their combined consciousness focused on a single objective, the complete destruction of the entity that threatened their worlds. The effect was beyond anything the dragons had achieved in their ancient war. Where the beams struck the Zephyrian hull, the alien tissue didn't just take damage, it began to change. The consuming void was replaced by something else, something that pulsed with new life and purpose. The entity began to break apart, its various segments unable to maintain cohesion as waves of bioelectric energy disrupted their connection. The alien minds that had merged to create the collective predator found themselves isolated, confused, experiencing sensations they had never known: wonder, curiosity, the desire to create rather than consume. But the battle was far from over. Even as the immediate threat dissolved, Sarah felt something else stirring in the depths of space. The entity they had defeated was just one of many, and its destruction had attracted the attention of something far worse. Through Ember's ancient memories, she caught a glimpse of what was coming. The Void Mother, the original source of the Zephyrian plague, was beginning to take notice of this corner of the galaxy, where her children had been not just defeated, but transformed. "We've won the battle," Sarah transmitted to the collective consciousness, "but the war is just beginning, and now they know we exist." As the human ships began to recover from their exertion, Sarah felt a new determination flowing through the network. Humanity had learned what it was capable of when it fought together. They had proven that life could triumph over the void, that consciousness could survive and grow in the face of absolute negation. But most importantly, they had learned that they were not alone. Across the galaxy, other dragon survivors were beginning to wake from their ancient slumber, drawn by the bioelectric resonance of the battle. And somewhere in the vast network of space, other species were starting to take notice of what had happened in this small system. The alliance that would eventually save the galaxy had taken its first steps, born from the friendship between a human xenobiologist and a baby dragon, who refused to let their species face extinction alone. 3 weeks after the first victory against the Zephyrians, the Kepler 442c system had transformed into humanity's first bioelectric research and training facility. Ships from across human space arrived daily, their crews eager to learn the techniques that had turned the tide of an impossible war. Sarah found herself at the center of it all, teaching combat meditation to military personnel, while Ember demonstrated the finer points of energy manipulation to fascinated xenobiologists. But even as humanity celebrated its newfound power, darker news arrived from the outer colonies. The Zephyrian response to their defeat had been swift and brutal. Entire star systems had gone dark as Void Mother's children converged on human space, their numbers so vast that they blocked out the light of stars themselves. "We're looking at a minimum of 50,000 individual entities," Admiral Chen reported during the morning briefing. The grizzled fleet commander had become Sarah's most trusted ally in the military hierarchy, though she still found it strange to be addressing someone who shared her surname. "Our enhanced fleets have won 3 more engagements, but for every entity we destroy, 5 more appear to take its place." Sarah nodded grimly, her hand resting on Ember's head as the dragon processed the tactical data through their mental link. Over the past weeks, their connection had deepened to the point where she sometimes couldn't tell where her thoughts ended and the dragon's began. It was a profound intimacy that both comforted and occasionally alarmed her. "The key isn't fighting them," she said finally, voicing conclusions that came from both human analysis and dragon wisdom. "We need to find the source." The Void Mother herself, Dr. Martinez looked up from his research station. According to the Dragon Archives Ember has helped us translate, the Void Mother exists partially outside normal space-time. She's more of a concept than a physical being, the living embodiment of entropy and consumption. But she can be reached, Ember added through their translation interface, its words carrying harmonics that made everyone in the room pause. The dragon's vocabulary had expanded dramatically as it learned human languages, though it still preferred the musical tones of its native speech. The dragons found the path long ago. They were preparing a final assault when their worlds fell. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine as Ember shared the memory directly with her. She saw vast dragon fleets gathered around a nexus point in space where reality itself grew thin. The dragons had discovered that the Void Mother could only be confronted at the convergence of multiple dimensional barriers, where the forces that separated life from void became permeable. "Show me," she whispered. The memory unfolded like a three-dimensional map in her mind. The nexus point was located in a region of space that humans had designated as the Magellan Void, an area where no stars shone and conventional navigation was impossible. Ancient dragon texts called it the Throat of Emptiness, the place where the Void Mother had first broken through into this reality. "That's where we need to go," Sarah said, opening her eyes to find the entire command staff staring at her. "That's where we end this," Admiral Chen frowned. "The Magellan Void is beyond our current jump range. We'd need to establish supply stations along the route, and that would take months." "We don't have months," Sarah replied. "Every day we delay, more worlds fall to the Zephyrians. And according to Ember's memories, there's something else we need to consider." She activated the holographic display and showed them the Dragon Archive's most disturbing entry. As the Void Mother consumed more life force, her influence on reality itself was growing stronger. Each destroyed world made it easier for her to manifest physically in their dimension. "If she completes the manifestation process," Sarah continued, "she won't need the Zephyrian entities anymore. She'll be able to consume entire star systems with a thought." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. They weren't just fighting for humanity's survival. They were racing to prevent the complete destruction of all life in the galaxy. "There is another way," Ember said, its voice carrying notes of ancient sadness. "The Dragon Road. The network of bioelectric conduits my people built between worlds. Some of them still function." Dr. Martinez's eyes widened. "You mean the energy signatures we've been detecting around dead systems? Those aren't natural phenomena?" "No," Ember replied. "They are highways through space created by linking the life force of entire planets. The dragons built them to connect their colonies and share knowledge across impossible distances." Sarah felt her pulse quicken as she understood the implications. "We could use the Dragon Road to reach the Void's edge directly, but we'd need ships capable of traveling through bioelectric conduits. We'd need more than ships," Admiral Chen said quietly. "We'd need crews willing to link their consciousness with the Dragon Road itself. It would be like becoming part of the network permanently." The weight of what they were proposing settled over the room like a shroud. They were talking about transforming humanity at a fundamental level, turning themselves into something that was neither fully human nor dragon, but something new. "There's something else," Ember said, its voice barely above a whisper. "The final battle at the nexus point cannot be won by force. The Void Mother exists in a state where conventional energy, even bioelectric energy, becomes meaningless. The only way to defeat her is to offer something she cannot consume." "What could she possibly not be able to consume?" Dr. Martinez asked. Through their link, Sarah felt Ember's answer before it spoke, and the knowledge broke her heart. "Hope," the dragon said simply. "True hope can only exist in a conscious mind that chooses to believe in the future, despite overwhelming evidence to the contrary. It cannot be taken or consumed or destroyed. It can only be freely given." Sarah understood immediately what Ember was trying to tell her. The final victory would require someone to willingly sacrifice themselves, to walk into the heart of the Void Mother's darkness and offer their hope for the future as a gift. The act of voluntary sacrifice would create a paradox that the consuming void could not resolve. Something, freely given, could not be taken. But such a sacrifice would mean permanent separation from everything and everyone the volunteer had ever loved. "I'll go," Sarah said immediately, but Ember pressed against her leg, its scales shifting to the deep blue of dragon sorrow. "No," the little dragon said. "This task belongs to my people. We created the problem when we failed to stop the Void Mother the first time. The sacrifice must be ours. You're just a baby, Sarah protested, her voice breaking. You've barely had a chance to live. I carry the memories of all who came before, Ember replied with dignity that seemed impossible for such a small creature. In me, the entire dragon race will make this choice freely. It is the only way. The room had gone completely quiet. Everyone present understood that they were witnessing something unprecedented, a decision that would either save the galaxy or doom it forever. Sarah knelt down and took Ember in her arms. The little dragon's warmth a sharp contrast to the cold certainty of what lay ahead. They had found each other by accident, a human scientist and an alien refugee, but their bond had become something that transcended species and time itself. Now that bond would be tested by the ultimate separation. We'll find another way, Sarah whispered, but even as she spoke the words, she knew they were both hoping for a miracle that might never come. The final journey to the Magellan Void was about to begin, and neither of them was ready for the goodbye that waited at its end. The Dragon Road stretched before them like a river of living light, its bioelectric currents carrying the combined human-dragon fleet toward the Magellan Void at speeds that defied conventional physics. Sarah stood on the bridge of the flagship Harmony, watching reality blur past the viewports as they traveled through conduits built by a civilization that had died fighting the very enemy they now rushed to face. Ember sat beside her, no longer the small creature she had first discovered on the mining station. Exposure to the Dragon Road had triggered rapid growth in the little dragon, awakening genetic programs that had lain dormant for eons. It now stood nearly as tall as Sarah's waist, its scales having shifted through every color of the spectrum before settling on a deep, opalescent silver that seemed to contain starlight. But the physical changes were nothing compared to the transformation in Ember's consciousness. Through their link, Sarah could feel the weight of ancient memories flooding back, not just the genetic inheritance it had always carried, but the actual experiences of dragons who had walked this same path millions of years ago. They were so brave, Ember said quietly, its voice now carrying harmonics that resonated with the ship's hull itself. My ancestors knew they were flying to their deaths, but they went anyway because someone had to make the choice. Admiral Chen approached from the tactical station, his expression grim. Long-range sensors are picking up massive energy signatures ahead. The Zephyrian fleet is already assembled at the nexus point. We're looking at numbers that make their previous attacks look like scouting missions. Through the ship's bioelectric enhancement systems, Sarah could feel the fear and determination of every crew member in the fleet. They had all volunteered for this mission knowing the odds, understanding that most of them would not return. But they had also seen what happened to worlds that fell to the Zephyrians, and death in battle was preferable to the slow consumption of everything they held dear. How long until we reach the convergence point? Sarah asked. 18 hours, Chen replied, assuming the Dragon Road holds together that long. The conduits are starting to show stress fractures. Whatever the dragons built these things from, it was never meant to carry this much traffic. Sarah nodded, then turned to address the entire fleet through the communication system. This is Dr. Chen. In 18 hours, we'll face the source of the Zephyrian plague. I won't lie to you about the odds. Most of us won't survive what's coming. But what we accomplish today will determine the fate of every living world in the galaxy. She paused, gathering her thoughts before continuing. The dragons who built these roads fought the same enemy we face now. They lost, but their sacrifice bought time for life to evolve and spread to new worlds. Today we have the chance to finish what they started, to prove that consciousness, hope, and love are stronger than the void that seeks to consume them. Across the fleet, responses poured in from every ship. Words of determination, promises to fight to the last breath, messages of love for families they might never see again. Through the bioelectric network that connected them all, Sarah felt the collective will of humanity focused on a single purpose, the protection of life itself. Ember's clawed hand touched her arm, drawing her attention. There is something I must tell you, the dragon said, its mental voice heavy with sorrow. The sacrifice at the nexus point, it cannot be made alone. The Void Mother has grown too powerful. It will require both our species, joined in perfect unity, to create the paradox that destroys her. Sarah's blood went cold as she understood the implications. You're saying we both have to die? No, Ember replied, its thoughts carrying complex harmonics of loss and hope. We have to become something else. Something that exists in the space between life and death, between order and chaos. We will cease to be individuals, but we will become eternal guardians of the boundary between existence and the void. The weight of this revelation settled over Sarah like a physical force. She had known that someone would have to sacrifice themselves to stop the Void Mother, but she had not understood that the price would be the complete transformation of their beings. They would not die. They would become something that had never existed before, a permanent sentinel standing watch at the edge of reality itself. And if we refuse, she asked, though she already knew the answer, then every world falls to darkness, and consciousness itself becomes extinct. The hours that followed passed in a blur of preparation and farewell. Sarah recorded messages for her family on Earth, trying to explain choices that seemed impossible to justify. She walked through the ship, speaking with crew members who had become family during their incredible journey together. Each conversation was a small goodbye, a recognition that the woman who entered the Nexus Point would not be the same one who emerged. When the Dragon Road finally deposited them at the edge of the Magellan Void, the sight that greeted them defied description. Space itself seemed to be rotting away, with vast tears in reality revealing the hungry darkness that lay beneath. Zephyrian entities numbered in the millions filled the surrounding space, their combined presence creating gravitational distortions that bent light into impossible angles, and at the center of it all was the Void Mother herself. She was beautiful in the way that a black hole is beautiful, a perfect circle of absolute nothingness that drew all light and matter into its embrace. But Sarah could sense the intelligence behind that darkness, ancient beyond measure and utterly alien to anything that had ever lived. The battle began immediately. The enhanced human fleet engaged the Zephyrian entities, while Sarah and Ember traveled to the Nexus Point in a small shuttle, protected by volunteers who knew they were making their own final journey. The bioelectric weapons that had proven so effective in earlier battles barely slowed the Void Mother's children here, where reality itself was coming apart. "Remember," Ember said as they approached the convergence point, "what we do here echoes across all possible futures. Every choice, every moment of courage or despair becomes part of the foundation on which tomorrow is built." Sarah took the dragon's clawed hand in hers, feeling the warmth of their connection one last time. Around them, the battle raged as humanity threw itself against impossible odds, buying them the precious minutes needed to reach their destination. "Together?" she asked. "Together," Ember confirmed. They stepped from the shuttle into space itself, their bioelectric enhancement allowing them to survive in the vacuum as they walked toward the Void Mother. With each step, Sarah felt herself changing, her consciousness expanding beyond the boundaries of her individual identity. She was still herself, but she was also becoming something more, a bridge between the world of the living and the realm of eternal darkness. The Void Mother's attention focused on them with the weight of cosmic hunger. Sarah felt the creature's disbelief as it encountered something it could not categorize or consume. Here were two beings, one human and one dragon, freely choosing to sacrifice their individual existence for the sake of strangers they would never meet. Hope, pure, freely given hope for a future neither of them would see. The paradox created by their willing sacrifice tore through the Void Mother's being like a sword of pure light. For the first time in eons, the cosmic predator experienced pain, confusion, and something it had never known before, doubt about its own purpose. As the Void Mother began to unravel, Sarah and Ember felt their consciousness merging with the fundamental forces that governed the boundary between existence and nothingness. They became guardians of that threshold, eternal sentinels who would stand watch against any future threats to life itself. The last thing Sarah remembered as an individual was the sight of the Zephyrian entities transforming, their consuming darkness replaced by new patterns of life and growth. The plague was ending, not through destruction but through transformation. As the Void Mother's children learned to create rather than consume, across the galaxy, worlds that had been stripped of life began to bloom again. The Dragon Roads carried seeds of new consciousness to distant stars, while the surviving humans and awakened dragons worked together to build a civilization based on the unity they had discovered in their darkest hour. And at the edge of reality, two consciousnesses that had once been human and dragon maintained their eternal vigil, their love for life itself serving as a permanent barrier against the return of absolute darkness. The separation that had brought tears had become the foundation for the greatest hope the galaxy had ever known.